Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, June 19th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside today, we are looking at a high of 81.3 degrees and a low of 61.8 degrees. It is a beautiful Friday, and it is especially significant because today is Juneteenth, a time for reflection and celebration across the country. In our main stories today, we will look at the reasoning behind the Supreme Court ruling involving gun restrictions for individuals who use drugs. We are also examining the arguments surrounding the proposal in California to implement a one-time tax on the state's billionaires. Plus, we have a variety of other headlines to help you stay informed on the issues that matter most. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Supreme Court handed down a big Second Amendment ruling yesterday. For more, we're joined by reporter Ethan. Good morning.
Good morning, Grace. Yes, this came down on June 18th, just yesterday. The case is United States versus Gemini, and it's getting attention from the Associated Press, PBS NewsHour, and the Texas Tribune. The court sided with a Texas marijuana user, ruling a federal gun ban violates the Second Amendment.
So who exactly is at the center of this case?
His name is Ali Daniel Gemini, and he's a Texas marijuana user. He challenged a 1968 law that prohibits gun ownership for people who use drugs illegally. What's important here is that Gemini wasn't charged with any other crimes. He wasn't accused of using a weapon while under the influence either. His argument was simple, that a blanket categorical ban like that is unconstitutional.
And the justices agreed with him. How did the vote break down?
It was a notably broad coalition, Grace. The decision was joined by Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Thomas, Sotomayor, Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Jackson. So you've got both conservative and liberal justices lined up here. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote for the court. He said the government's power to seize firearms from drug users is narrowly limited to those who are actually considered dangerous.
That's an interesting point. What did Gorsuch say about marijuana users specifically?
He made a pretty striking observation. Gorsuch noted that while the 1968 law was originally meant to keep weapons away from dangerous individuals, the millions of Americans who now use marijuana simply can't be characterized that way. And he went further. He argued that because the federal government has largely tolerated, and in some cases fueled, the widespread use of cannabis for health and recreational purposes, it's, quote, awkwardly positioned, end quote, to claim these users are categorically dangerous.
So does this mean any drug user can now own a gun?
No, and that's really important for people to understand. The court stressed that this decision is, quote, narrow, end quote. It doesn't touch several big areas. For instance, the court did not rule on efforts to ban firearm possession for people who are currently addicted to illegal drugs or those who are presently intoxicated. So this is a much more limited holding than the headline might suggest.
What about prosecutors? Can they still go after gun owners who use drugs?
They can, in certain circumstances. Prosecutors may still charge a marijuana user if they can provide individualized proof that the person's drug use makes them a danger to themselves or others. They could also act if it can be proven that a specific drug always renders its users dangerous. So the door isn't closed, it just requires that individualized showing rather than a sweeping ban.
Are there other limits we should know about?
Yes, two more worth flagging. The ruling does not affect the law that disarms individuals convicted of felonies, which is 18 U.S.C. Section 922, Grams 1. And the court didn't address potential future laws Congress might adopt regarding specific drugs that pose a special risk of firearm misuse. So lawmakers still have room to act if they craft narrower legislation.
I understand there were some separate opinions too. What stood out?
There were, and they're fascinating. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote separately to argue that the law at issue may actually exceed Congress's power to regulate interstate commerce under the Commerce Clause. That's a different constitutional angle entirely. Then, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson filed her own concurrence, but she used it to criticize the, quote, history and tradition, end quote, test from the Bruin case. She called that test, quote, unworkable, end quote, and argued that means-end scrutiny is a more rational way to judge firearm regulations.
Let's talk politics. How does this land for the Trump administration?
It's a significant defeat for them, frankly. President Donald Trump's Republican administration had actually defended this 1968 law, even though it generally opposes other gun restrictions. So this was an unusual posture for them, and the Associated Press noted that Justice Gorsuch was blunt about it. He explicitly said the administration's core argument, quote, fails under every measure, end quote.
This law has come up in a high-profile case before, hasn't it?
It has, Grace. This is the same measure that played a role in the case against Hunter Biden. He was convicted in Wilmington, Delaware, for purchasing a gun while addicted to cocaine back in 2018, so about 8 years ago now. He was later pardoned by his father, then President Joe Biden. So this statute has touched some very prominent figures in recent years.
And the country's relationship with marijuana has been changing fast.
Dramatically so. More than half of U.S. states have now legalized it broadly. And just this past April, only a couple months ago, the Trump administration reclassified medical marijuana as a less dangerous drug. That said, recreational use still remains illegal at the federal level. So you've got this real tension between shifting state laws, federal policy, and now this court ruling all colliding.
How are advocacy groups responding to all this?
The reaction is sharply divided, as you'd expect. On the supporting side, you have an unusual mix. The ACLU, the National Rifle Association, and cannabis legalization groups like NORML all backed Himani. The ACLU praised the ruling for stopping the government from making, quote, categorical and unfounded assumptions, end quote, about danger. NORML called it a, quote, vindication of personal freedom, end quote. And the Second Amendment Foundation called it a, quote, major victory for gun owners, end quote.
And who's pushing back against the decision?
The critics are vocal too. Everytown for Gun Safety argued that, quote, drugs and guns can make for a dangerous mix, end quote. And a group called Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which opposes legalization, condemned the decision outright. Their CEO, Kevin Sabet, said public health and safety were, quote, collateral damage, end quote, in the court's focus on Second Amendment history. So there's real concern from the public safety side.
Where does this fit in the bigger picture of gun cases at the court?
This is part of a real wave, Grace. It follows a landmark 2022 ruling that expanded gun rights. According to PBS NewsHour and the Associated Press, since 2022, the court has struck down a ban on bump stocks, those rapid-fire accessories. But it's also upheld strict regulations on, quote, ghost gun, end quote, kits, and laws protecting victims of domestic violence. So the record is genuinely mixed.
And there's more coming, I take it?
There is. The court is currently considering another firearm case, this one about strict carry regulations in Hawaii, so we'll be watching closely to see how the justices handle that. Taken together, these cases are really reshaping the boundaries of the Second Amendment, piece by piece. Yesterday's ruling in Himani is just the latest chapter.
Really helpful context. Thanks for breaking it all down for us, Ethan.
My pleasure, Grace. Always glad to help make sense of it.
Now to our second story this morning, a major fight brewing in California over a tax on the ultra-wealthy. Chloe, what's at stake here?
Quite a lot, Grace. There's a proposed ballot initiative to levy a one-time tax on California's richest residents to fund the healthcare system. Just 2 days ago, on June 17th, the Secretary of State's office verified that petitioners collected enough signatures. They needed roughly 875,000, and they cleared that bar.
So when does this officially land on the ballot?
It's slated to officially qualify for the November ballot on June 25th, which is less than a week from today. The one catch is that proponents could still withdraw it before then, so while it's on track, nothing's fully locked in. That deadline is going to matter a great deal as negotiations heat up behind the scenes.
Walk us through the actual tax. Who's footing the bill?
The initiative is bankrolled by the Service Employees International Union United Healthcare Workers West, known as SEIU-UHW, which has poured more than $31 million into the campaign. It proposes a one-time 5% tax on California residents whose net worth exceeded $1 billion as of January 1, 2026. That would affect roughly 200 individuals, and they'd be allowed to pay in installments over 5 years.
And how much money are we talking about?
Proponents estimate it would generate $100 billion in revenue. The nonpartisan Legislative Analyst's Office is more cautious, projecting just tens of billions in the first few years. The money would go into a special fund controlled by the legislature. 90% is reserved specifically to rescue the state's healthcare system and Medi-Cal, while 10% goes to social services like education and food assistance, including CalFresh.
Why now, though? What's driving this push?
According to reporting from CalMatters, Cap Radio, and ABC7 News, it's a direct response to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed by the Trump administration. That federal law changed Medicaid, adding shorter eligibility periods and work requirements. Experts say those changes will dramatically reduce the number of people with publicly funded insurance. So supporters frame this tax as a backstop for what's coming.
And how hard would those federal cuts hit California specifically?
The projections are pretty stark, Grace. The State Department of Healthcare Services estimates federal cuts could cost California $30 billion annually. Miranda Dietz of the UC Berkeley Labor Center suggests nearly 3 million Californians could lose health care over 2 years, while other findings put it as high as 3.4 million losing Medicaid coverage. It's a sweeping potential impact.
That's coverage. What about jobs and the cost of insurance?
The Billionaire Tax Now Coalition claims the cuts could result in the loss of 145,000 healthcare jobs. They also warn ACA insurance premiums could rise by as much as 97%. And on food security, losses are estimated between $2.5 billion and $4.5 billion annually. That could potentially affect over 3 million households.
With numbers like that, I'd expect Democrats to be united, are they?
Not at all, and that's what makes this fascinating. The measure has created a real rift among Democrats and labor groups. Supporters include Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, the Teamsters, AFSCME California, and billionaire Tom Steyer. So you've got significant progressive firepower lining up behind it.
So who's standing in the way?
The opposition is led by Governor Gavin Newsom, who's consistently opposed tax increases. He argues they drive wealthy individuals and businesses out of the state. On Real Time with Bill Maher, Newsom said, quote, "Dozens and dozens," end quote, of people have already left. Other opponents include the California Business Roundtable, the California Hospital Association, the California Medical Association, Planned Parenthood, and the California Teachers Association.
It's striking to see hospitals and Planned Parenthood opposing a healthcare tax. Let's turn to Silicon Valley. What are they doing?
Wealthy tech figures have launched a genuinely expensive campaign to defeat this. As of June 15th, they'd raised $107.9 million. The biggest player is Sergey Brin, the Google co-founder, with a net worth of $300 billion. He reportedly moved to Nevada because of the tax threat and has contributed $82 million to a committee called Building a Better California.
$82 million from one person. Who else is writing big checks?
Millions have come from Google CEO Eric Schmidt, Kleiner Perkins chairman John Doerr, and the wonderful company president Stuart Resnick. And there are other political action committees in play too. Chris Larson founded one called Golden State Promise, and Ron Conway is funding another called Stop the Squeeze. So there's a coordinated, well-funded counteroffensive forming.
You mentioned Building a Better California. Are they just running ads or something more?
Something more clever, actually. They're pursuing countermeasures that may also appear on the November ballot. One is the Improving Transparency, Effectiveness, and Efficiency in California Government Act, which would require audits of state programs funded by special taxes. The second is the Retirement and Personal Savings Protection Act, which would prohibit new state taxes on personal property. If both pass, that second measure would effectively cancel the billionaire tax.
So they could win even if voters approve the original tax. What do critics say about the economics?
Critics, including the Legislative Analyst's Office, warn that while the tax brings immediate money, it could cause long-term declines in annual income tax revenues by hundreds of millions of dollars as the ultra-wealthy leave. Fortune reported that 6 individuals moved out last year before the tax applied, representing a loss of $27 billion in potential revenue. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg has also reportedly moved, though he was a resident as of the January 1st deadline.
And there's a legal angle too, right?
Right. Because the tax applies to residents as of January 1st, 2026, it's retroactive. Legal experts, including UCLA School of Law professor Mark Peterson, suggests that retroactive nature invites constitutional challenges. So even if voters approve it, the measure could be tied up in court for some time. That uncertainty hangs over the whole effort.
With the deadline so close, is there any chance of a compromise?
There's been an attempt. Just yesterday, on June 18th, SEIU-UHW offered to abandon the 5% proposal if Governor Newsom would support a 2% levy instead. But reports indicate that offer was, quote, not enough, end quote, to bring the governor on board. And here's the wrinkle. Because of that June 25th deadline, any 2% alternative would now have to pass directly through the legislature.
So the clock is really the deciding factor here. Where do voters stand?
Public opinion is genuinely divided. A UC Berkeley Citron Center Politico poll found 50% of voters favor the initiative. But 54% are concerned about wealthy individuals leaving the state, and 63% worry about losing their businesses. A March poll from the UC Berkeley Institute of Government Studies Los Angeles Times showed slightly higher support at 52%.
So even supporters have real anxieties about the fallout.
Exactly. Voters seem sympathetic to the goal of saving healthcare, but nervous about the consequences of taxing billionaires so directly. That tension is precisely what both campaigns are spending tens of millions of dollars trying to tip in their favor. Between now and November, Californians are going to hear a lot about this. And with the June 25th qualifying deadline almost here, the next several days could reshape the entire fight.
Fascinating story, and clearly far from settled. Chloe, thank you for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure, Grace. I'll be watching that deadline closely and keep you posted.
Here are some other headlines. Things are heating up in Moscow, and we mean that literally. On Thursday, June 18th, 2026, Ukrainian drones decided to crash the party at a major oil refinery on the southeastern edge of the city, just 9 miles from the Kremlin. It was a real blowout that sent huge plumes of black smoke into the sky, leading to some sooty rain that left local cars looking a bit charcoal-grilled. This particular refinery, which pumps out more than 1/3 of the region's fuel, was actually hit twice in 1 week, having also been targeted the previous Tuesday. The attack really put a damper on travel plans, as aviation authorities halted flights from 4 different airports. The business daily Kommersant reports that more than 500 flights were delayed or canceled, leaving travelers in a total whirlwind. President Volodymyr Zelensky is playing hardball, stating that if Ukraine is going to burn, Moscow will burn too, in a bid to force Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha added that this is simply the fuel for the fire caused by Russia's own war of aggression. While Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin claims the fire was largely contained, other officials are fueling the flames of war. Speaker Vyacheslav Volodin warned of harsher blows and more powerful weapons, while nationalist Konstantin Malafeyev took to Telegram to suggest the use of nuclear weapons. Interestingly, the attack happened just hours after President Zelensky coordinated with the leaders of France and the United States following support pledges from the G7 summit. At the time, President Putin was away in Kazan, hosting leaders of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, seemingly out of the loop on his own doorstep. As for the gas pumps, independent outlet Asianstvo reports that 1 in 4 stations across multiple regions have introduced restrictions, though city officials insist everything is running smoothly. Moving over to the Atlantic, things are getting a bit chilly between allies. Defense Secretary Hegseth has lashed out at NATO, announcing a formal review of United States forces stationed in Europe. It seems the alliance is hitting a rough patch, In the financial world, it looks like some investors in China were playing the long game, secretly acquiring stakes in SpaceX before its initial public offering. Talk about a stealth launch. Finally, we head to the Golden State, where the sunshine is meeting some shade. One lawmaker's new proposal is under fire for potentially making California the most secretive state in the country, leaving many in the dark. Meanwhile, Governor Newsom's promises to help Californians build new careers are running on empty, as the funding for those programs is officially drying up. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.8, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.